All right. Hopefully no one is going to fall asleep as we approach the lunch hour and the lights dim. Thank you very much to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, thank you, and to the UN SDSN for inviting C40. My name is Flavio Coppola, and as Sam mentioned, I manage the urban planning program at C40. I'm filling in here for our Director of Governance and Global Partnerships, Andrea Fernandez, who sends her apologies. I have to say I'm really thrilled to be here to tell you about C40's work, but most of all to hear from a lot of our young leaders that are here about how we can best elevate their voices through our work. Let's see. All right, so first of all, let me tell you about what C40 is for those of you who are not familiar. So we are a network of mayors. We organize the top 100 mayors on developing and implementing the toughest climate targets in the world. We have members across all continents, 95 cities right now, representing 700 million citizens and about a quarter of the global economy. What we really do is that we push our mayors and we support them in developing actions on mitigation and adaptation that are more ambitious. Our theory of change here is that if we can drive more ambitious action at the municipal level in large megacities and with smaller innovative cities in the field of climate action, then the rest will follow, particularly when we have an action at the national level. So why do we need to do this? Let me see if this works. Okay, great. So I don't think I need to tell anyone here about why C40 is doing this work. Our young activists across the world are showing us every Friday and at other times in the week as well that we don't have any time to waste and we must take things forward. You know, a lot of you here are part of the generation that is going to see most of the impacts of climate change, more than some of us who are a bit older. And you know that these strikes and these protests are meant to really drive change. So again, just a slide on the effects of climate change. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on this. Countless deaths rolling in every year, people being displaced, mass climate-induced forced migration, internal migration, and international migration happening, and this is just the beginning. So we really need to be pushing our action forward. And on top of this, the effects of climate change being quite daunting, they're also unfair. The people who are the least responsible for us being in this situation are those who are suffering the most. We have 10% of the world population responsible for half of global emissions. Climate events that are going to force 100 million people into extreme poverty in the next 10 years, according to predictions, and 200 million climate migrants by 2050. It's a dire scenario that we're looking at, and it is the one that we will be facing unless we take bold action. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to turn mayors into climate leaders. We have 70 of our 95 mayors that are now committed to develop plans that are aligned with the pathway for 1.5 degree warming, according to the Paris Agreement, according to the emissions that they have in their cities. Many of them are making very bold commitments in many different sectors, and I was really interested in hearing for my colleague Ms. Delière on reducing emissions and waste from construction and demolition, because it's one of the areas that we're getting our mayors to commit on, as well as clean transportation, air quality, waste, food, you name it. We're trying to sign up all of our mayors to these ambitious goals and then support them to actually deliver on them. So we get them to move through city-to-city learning, which is the idea of peer-to-peer learning, so having one city teach another. We have some direct technical assistance as well, partnerships, research. And I just want to give you one example to make it a bit concrete. Do people recognize where this is, where this picture is taken? So this is Washington, D.C. So in the aftermath of Hurricane Florence, which was a Category 4 earthquake. So in the preparation for this earthquake that was coming in the immediate aftermath, we had Washington, D.C. work with other cities in the C40 network to share best practice emergency protocols. And what the District of Columbia got out of it in the end is that they are now investing $5.77 million to produce a model of real-time joint probability extreme weather events, which is inspired by something that's done in New Orleans. And a lot of, they also put in place new protocols for collaboration with different agencies and level of governance. And again, this is something that was developed through city-to-city sharing. And this is just one small example in an area of the resiliency, but there's many more which I'm happy to talk to you about. I just wanted to get a little bit concrete. Now, despite this, there are many barriers that we see our cities facing. We've identified 6 main ones, which you can see up here: city governance, access to finance, et cetera, et cetera. I want to focus on the last one because I think that's the one that's most relevant to our discussion here. Engaging citizens is key. Mayors really need to feel that if they're taking a really bold action, then they have the backing of their constituents. This is especially important when we see a change of government. You know, mayors are not in power forever. They're in power for 1, 2, sometimes 3 terms. But when an election occurs, we want to make sure that the new person in power follows through. And another thing that I think is crucial is that the voice of young people is incredibly, incredibly important to mayors. And this is something that really resonates with them. And so I want to tell you a few words about how we engage young people, how we engage youth leaders, particularly in the field of climate action. So last week we just had our World Mayor Summit. So Alexandra Villaseñor, who's right here, coming from New York City, was in it as well with her sister too, and I think a few more attendees whose names I saw around the room. So just to focus on our youth during this event, we had 140 young climate leaders, including youth climate strikes organizers coming from 20 countries. This was the first time in our organization's 12 years of existence that we featured them front and center. And I have to tell you, the impact and the feedback was amazing on that. And we did 2 things, particularly, which I will tell you about in a minute and a half, probably, not more, so I don't go too much over time. First of all, C40 announced a global Green New Deal at the summit. This global Green New Deal, led by our new chair, Mayor Garcetti of LA, acknowledges the global climate emergency that we're in, pushes for any climate action that's taken to be inclusive, and we think that's fundamental. There is no good climate policy that isn't inclusive, and, you know, pushes for everyone to work together to develop a just transition and correct long-running environmental injustices. And I can tell you more about that when we get a chance to chat later on. Another thing that sort of happened on the spur of the moment, as we had many different activities that our youth activists were involved in. So press conference, a roundtable with mayors, a youth takeover at Copenhagen City Hall, is that we decided under the leadership of Mayor Eric Garcetti to launch a global youth initiative to really feature youth front and center as we move forward in our action. And I just want to end on a humble note, saying that we don't have this all figured out. We need to hear from the young people in this room and the expert in this room on how do we engage and elevate youth voices, youth climate organizers' voices best to move forward, because the experts at youth participation are the youth themselves. Thank you very much.